My name is Lesley Loksi Chan, and I am the co-director of Lloyd Wong Unfinished, and the film is in Berlinale Shorts.
So you take the one end. Now, I don't know what this is called, but you take this end, and you open your bag. Oops. Now, you should wash your hands before this, because it is supposed to be clean. And all you do is puncture. There's a little seal inside that will be punctured by the sharp end of this. And then you hang it up on your IV pole. And you fill the little reservoir here by squeezing it. See?
Hello and welcome to the 39th Teddy Award. My name is Jan-Felix Wuttig, and today I'm here with director Lesley Loksi Chan to talk about her film Lloyd Wong Unfinished. Lesley, thank you so much for being here and taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you so much for the film. Lloyd Wong Unfinished uses archival footage of artist Lloyd Wong, sort of documenting his struggles with AIDS on a physical level, but also socially and politically. Could you maybe tell me how the project started out for you?
There's so many starting points. I guess I received an email about 5 years ago from John Grayson, who is an artist, video artist, AIDS activist. He was also my professor, I think almost 20 years ago now, but we've kept in touch. And he emailed me along with a group of other filmmakers, artists, researchers, to let me know that they had just discovered this, what he called like the long lost autobiographical footage that Lloyd Wong was working on for an episode of Toronto Living with AIDS. And he invited me to work on some sort of restoration of it. And I had never heard of Lloyd Wong before. I didn't know who he was. But as soon as I saw the footage, I became so mesmerized by him. And I felt like, you know, just also so honored that I had been invited to work with this footage. So I said yes, and at the same time, John invited me to join a residency called Viral Interventions, and this is a residency for artists and communities to create new works about living with AIDS. And this residency was such a huge part of like the starting point for me, because it was through the residency and all the artists that I work with and the communities that he connected us with that really helped me to think through a lot of the questions that I had working on this project. And I was also paired up with a mentor, Richard Fung, who is also a queer filmmaker, AIDS activist. So really it started in community, and I feel like throughout the process, I worked on it for over 4 years, but it was the community that sort of kept me going. And yeah, that's the starting point, and also the ending point as well. Actually, there is no ending. I don't believe in endings, but yeah.
You have a larger array of different types of scenes in the film. So we would see Lloyd interacting with a relative, or we would see him speaking out against marginalisation or the provision of healthcare. And we even see him giving a tutorial on how to interlink different lines of AIDS medication. what was the idea behind combining all these different types of scenes?
All the material that is in the film, that is like video and film, that was all Lloyd's. I didn't create anything new except for the research notes that I interspersed in the film. So really, I received the combination, and I thought it was so important to present it as the combination. Like I could have left some of it out, right? But it was so important to keep it as a combination because it really shows what a complex person he was. Yes, he really wanted to show the details of what it was to live with AIDS as a Chinese Canadian person in Toronto during the AIDS crisis. But he was also such a beautiful critical thinker and such a brilliant experimental video artist as well. And I thought that combination just spoke to, you know, what a complex human he was, but also I guess like how he was really trying to show us different sides of him, and to not be flattened the way that he felt that society was flattening him.
Yeah. Now, for those of the people who are not really familiar with this work, could you explain a little bit about how you found these different aspects of his personality sort of embodied in the body of his work?
I guess, should I also just maybe talk about, like, the footage was, when it was given to us, it was supposed to be like the Toronto Living with AIDS television show, which is in 1990, Toronto Living with AIDS was a community-driven cable access TV show that was produced by John Grayson and the late Michael Balzer. At the time, the show was really quite groundbreaking because there were not images of people living with AIDS from all different cultural communities. So dominant images really excluded women living with AIDS and people of color living with AIDS. And so every weekend this show, this TV show would present AIDS activist videos, and the producers invited folks from all different cultural communities to create these sort of like self-representations of what it was to live with AIDS, or documentaries, or these sort of like wild experimental AIDS tapes. And the work that Lloyd was creating was meant for this TV show. So the main part of, like one of the main parts of the film is Lloyd presenting how to prepare phoscarnet IV treatment. And he has presented himself in sort of like an educational sort of performance, but behind him with green screen he has placed images that you would see on television, like a cooking show, or like that workout, the workout video, where the guy's like pumping iron, and I felt that like it was so interesting. He used green screen to always create this like foreground background dialogue that was happening. What he was presenting with the IV demo was something that was always hidden, and he was trying to challenge that by putting it out there. But also that scene where he's talking, it's like a talking head, and he's talking about his experience and all the like the racism he's experienced, and he put himself in the context of a pool hall. So he's bringing these sort of conversations that are normally hidden into the public. And I felt that this sort of like foreground, background that was happening was interesting because he's always like being othered, basically. There's this othering. And that's why I chose to put the footage of him in the hospital beside himself, so that maybe there can be a conversation where he's being seen on his own terms instead of this like othering all the time. So I think that's a really important part of the material that is in the film.
I think so too. In between the archival footage you have, as you touched upon earlier, you have these notes, some of which sort of suggest an approach for the film. Others give notes on further material like movies that might inspire an approach. Was it a way for you to sort of reflect on the process of the film, or what was the idea behind including these notes?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's right. It was, they definitely are a documentation of my process, but it was also a way for me to show how there were so many different ways that a person can be remembered. So I spoke to artists, I spoke to historians, I spoke to archivists, and everyone had a different approach and a different sort of methodology to approach the material and approach his life. And I would find that whenever I spoke to them, I would start, like when I was speaking to Ryan Conrad, who was a huge part of like sharing this footage with me, he wrote an incredible book called, or he edited a book that just was published recently called Toronto Living with AIDS. And he did a lot of work around Lloyd Wong that helped me. And he was really, like, he's just such a amazing historian, and I felt so insecure because I thought maybe I should be like Ryan and start trying to dig deeply into the historical aspects, the social, like he's just, I'm not Ryan. So, but I found that like all these conversations with different people with different perspectives also were a way for me to try to find out what my place was, because I felt like Lloyd is a stranger to me, and but I felt this responsibility that I had been entrusted with this footage from the community, and this like honor, like what an honor it is to receive this queer inheritance, right? So I think the notes for me were trying to make sense of my relationship with him and my relationship to the footage. And it was changing all the time. Like everyone I spoke to just would send me off in different directions, and that's why I chose green for the background of the notes, and sort of inspired by his green screen where he was taking himself in and out of context, and the backgrounds can always be changed, right? Like when you're trying to learn about a person, depending on who you talk to, you're gonna get completely different stories. So I wanted to use the green, but also keep it blank, because I felt like I didn't want to fix who he was. I wanted to keep it open so that we can always like not pin him down in the way that he was trying to, speak out against.
Yeah, and I found that was a beautiful way of including that, because as you said, there's, whenever you approach something or take something on, and you have this material and you're trying to sort of show it to the public, whatever you do with it kind of changes it in a way, you know? And you don't want to, like you said, you had this honor sort of bestowed upon you, and you want to deal with it in an adequate way. And so by putting all these different kind of methods in there, you chose to just kind of say like, okay, this is how I did it,
Yeah.
but there's different ways, and it can always be sort of fluid.
Yeah.
You know, there's no, like, I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
And what matters to me the most is to remember Lloyd Wong in the way that I think he wanted his work to be remembered.
Mm-hmm,
That's how I felt about
mm-hmm.
it. Yeah.
And we don't know, right? Like we don't
Right.
even, I don't even know what that means. But I think it's also fragments of notes, because I also just feel like there is no such thing as like the full picture.
Mm-hmm.
And the notes are also just a way for me to communicate that I'm very limited as well, right? Like I'm just picking out little bits and pieces. And but you mentioned there's like a part where there's like a list of films, and that was films that Stephen Andrews and John Grayson had suggested that I watch. I had never seen them before, and when I saw them, it also made me realize, like, because a lot of the films are about people living with AIDS, or artists living with AIDS who would collaborate with people in order to have them help them realize their work.
Yeah.
And it made me realize, like, oh, I'm part of like a tradition
Yeah.
of this sort of collaborative works, collaborations with people living with AIDS. And it was such a beautiful way for them to, like, they just said, oh, watch these films,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I guess that's what, yeah, it's when you actually spend a lot of time with the material, you start realizing things later on. Like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes
sure.
things are given to you, and
Yeah.
it takes some time for you to realize.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and I think I guess if you had doubts about your work, well, you needn't to have had them, because I felt that it's very beautiful how you included them in your work and how you dealt with the material. And I think, I guess, for them to give you these sort of suggestions was also a way, maybe, I mean, I'm not to say, but a way maybe to take away those doubts, to kind of show you that you are in a longer tradition of having these connections. Yeah. Lesley, I want to thank you again for taking the time and being here with us.
Thank you.
That's already it from me. And I wish you all the best. Thank you again for Lloyd Wong Unfinished. And I wish you all the best for the rest of the festival.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our pleasure.